Hi, I'm Nick. I'm one of the founders and owners of Roots Kombucha, a kombucha brewery in Malmo, Sweden. Today I'm going to show you how to make kombucha if you already have a kombucha culture. If you don't already have a kombucha culture, check out our other video on how to make a kombucha culture from a bottle of kombucha. Kombucha is fermented black tea. It's been consumed for millennia for its health promoting properties and because it tastes good. So to start with, you need some strong black tea, sweetened strong black tea. That's what's going to become kombucha after it ferments. So we're going to start with some black tea. You can also use green tea, herbal tea. People who make kombucha have a lot of things, but black tea really gives the kombucha culture what it needs. It gives it the nutrients that it needs to thrive and make a very good, proper kombucha. So there's your black tea. And here we have some pots. This one is just boiling water. You can make it stronger or weaker, but we generally want a pretty strong black tea. So we're going to add a little bit more than a tablespoon for each liter of water. A liter is about the same as a quart. So here we have 1, 2, 3 tablespoons. And I'm going to let that boil, a decent boil, for about 5 to 10 minutes. And that's going to make a black tea that's a little stronger than you might make if you were just going to have some black tea by itself. So here I've already boiled some black tea for about 10 minutes. It's a nice strong black tea. And you could add it in a bag or some kind of sieve, but I find it easier just to boil the black tea loose and then pour it through a sieve. So that's what I'm going to do here. So there I've got 3 liters, just over 3 quarts of strong black tea. As I said, the tea is the nutrient source for the kombucha, but the kombucha culture also needs an energy source, and that's sugar. So here I have plain white organic sugar. Now some people use other sugar sources, honey, agave syrup, I've even heard maple syrup being used, but the kombucha thrives most on just plain sucrose. So that's why we use organic white cane sugar. And the amount of sugar you add also varies. But the standard recipe is about half a deciliter, about 50 milliliters per liter. So if you're not using metric, that's about a 1/4 cup of sugar per quart. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. So I've got 3 liters here, then I'm going to add 1.5 deciliters, which would be about 3/4 of a cup. And I don't need to boil that very long. I'm just going to boil that so that the sugar definitely dissolves and so that I have a proper sterile product. So then I'm going to have hot, sweet black tea. Now before I add that to the kombucha culture, that needs to cool down to room temperature or slightly above room temperature. Often at home I would brew it at night, make it in the morning, or brew it in the morning and make it at night and just leave it during the day to cool off. But I've already taken a pot and put it in a sink of cold water. It'll cool in about 15 to 20 minutes that way. So there I've got a pot of sweet black tea, and here I've got a jar. I'm going to use this to make my kombucha in. Some people might also use a glass bowl. That also works quite well. You want something that has a decent surface area to depth ratio. This jar is sort of borderline. I would actually generally like something a little bit wider to depth. You want a lot of airspace. I'll mention why a little bit later. So I'm just going to pour my black tea into that jar. That's going to become kombucha. So here I've got some kombucha that I already brewed. If you just get a culture from somebody, or a mother from somebody, then you might have it in some other container. But the important thing is that you've got the kombucha culture. So now I'm going to transfer the kombucha mother, or the SCOBY, or the culture, however you want to call it, into this jar. So here is the mother. It's kind of gross, but we like what it makes. Now this looks, some people call it a mushroom. It's definitely not a mushroom. This material is actually made by the bacteria and not the yeast. So now I've transferred the mother to the tea. I'm also going to transfer some of the old or already brewed kombucha. And the reason is, the mother has all the microbes that it needs, but it's in just a plain sweet tea. I want to add something so that I lower the pH a little bit more quickly. So I'm going to add about 10% of the volume of already made kombucha to this. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So then I'm going to cover it with a cloth. Now the reason I said you want a large, wide container, and the reason I cover it with a cloth and not with a lid, is because the kombucha needs air to ferment. It's an aerobic fermentation. It needs oxygen. You don't want to seal it, or else the kombucha won't thrive. You won't make a very good kombucha. So I just cover it with a cloth and a rubber band. And now that's ready. Mother's in there, and the tea is already fermenting. So I'm going to give that about a week to 2 weeks. You can taste it over the time, and you'll see that it's getting more acidic, and that the tannic qualities of the tea are disappearing. And when you like it, it's done. So here, I've got some kombucha that's done. Now, a lot of people would just drink that straight as it is, and it's going to taste pretty good. And that's where most people stop. We find you make a much nicer product if it's got a little carbonation to it, and if it's a little bit sweeter, and maybe you want to add something to flavor it as well. So we use bottles like these. They're these old school glass bottles with a flip top, this little ceramic cap, and a little rubber gasket. That's great because it builds up some air pressure in it, so it carbonates. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and pour the kombucha into this. Now on these bottles, I've also used vodka bottles or other sort of 1 liter, 1 quart screw top glass bottles. But be a little careful because a decent amount of pressure will build up in them, and some bottles can actually explode, which has happened to me. We've also bought these bottles. These are sort of the exact same thing, but a more modern manufactured version. These are produced by a very large furniture manufacturer in Sweden, which I need not mention, but they're all over the world. I would just caution, we found these to not be of very high quality. They leak quite a bit. They won't hold the seal, and actually the liquid runs out if you tilt it over, so that's not such a good option. Other options, though, are these half-liter bottles that you can often buy beer in. So that's a manufacturer that makes a nice beer, and they still make these bottles. They're loved by home brewers, and they work great, but they're half-liter size. So here, I'm going to pour my kombucha into here. Now, if you just left that as it was and put the cap on, it would ferment a little bit more and make a nice carbonation, which I think really adds something to it. I'm going to add a little bit of sugar. One thing I forgot to mention, why I add sugar in the first place. I add sugar because that's the energy source for the kombucha culture. So I added about a quarter cup or about 50 milliliters of sugar per quart or liter. The final product has very, very low sugar, and it's generally quite dry, so you don't have to worry about that sugar. That's the energy source for the culture, and that's going to get fermented away and become other healthful organic acids. To this per liter, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of sugar. My tablespoon is over here. But if you don't want to add any sugar at this stage, it's not necessary, it'll still carbonate. So I have a little less than a tablespoon, which I'm going to add to that. And I'm also going to add some ginger. There's a lot of flavorings you can add. We at Roots Kombucha, we add, for example, orange peel, which gives it a really nice flavor a lot of people like. Turmeric, which is in Swedish gurkmeja, which gives it a really fantastic fruity flavor that you wouldn't at all predict from turmeric, at least the way dried turmeric tastes. We use fresh turmeric. We also make other flavors like apple cinnamon. But we're going to add ginger today, which is sort of one of the most common flavorings to add, and it gives it a really nice quality. So we start with some fresh ginger. For this liter bottle, I'm going to take a piece about that size. So here, I've already chopped up some ginger into little strips about so large. And I'm just going to drop them in there. So here, remember we've got the kombucha we've brewed, touch more sugar just to give that a bit more carbonation, a little bit of sweetness on the end, and ginger. Now I'm going to seal that. I'm going to leave that at room temperature for 3 to 5 days. And that's going to ferment nicely and it's going to extract a lot of that flavor from the ginger. And then I put it in the fridge. It can stay in the fridge for weeks or months. It keeps very well. So again, we've taken sweet black tea, we've added it to a jar, we've taken the kombucha culture, added that to the same jar, some of the old kombucha, and then we let that sit in the dark for a week and a half to 2 weeks. So if you want to see this information written out or want a little bit more information about kombucha, feel free to check out our website at rootskombucha.com or email us at rootskombucha@yahoo.com. So good luck, and I hope you like kombucha as much as we do.